Between 50% and 90% of indigenous populations in the Americas were wiped out within a century and a half simply because their immune systems had never encountered the pathogens brought by European explorers. How did our earliest ancestors manage to survive a world teeming with invisible biological killers without a single modern pill? What secret weapons did they possess that kept human beings from going extinct long before the first hospital was ever built? You might assume that waking up with a severe fever 50,000 years ago was an automatic death sentence. There were no doctors to call, no soft couches to rest on, and absolutely zero pharmaceutical drugs available to lower your temperature. Your only defenses were a dark cave, perhaps some questionable herbs gathered by a village elder, and the sheer hope that your body could fight off the infection before sunset. Yet against all odds, our ancient ancestors did not just survive one isolated plague or a single localized infection. They successfully navigated hundreds of thousands of years of biological nightmares across every climate and continent on Earth. This raises a profoundly fascinating mystery about human endurance. How did early humans conquer disease when the most advanced medical instrument they possessed was a sharpened rock? How did they fight off invisible enemies when the actual discovery of germ theory was still 50,000 years in the future? The reality of their survival strategy is far more brutal, highly clever, and deeply surprising than anyone might expect. To understand their incredible survival, we first have to clarify the actual types of illnesses they faced. It is a common misconception that early human existence was just one continuous nightmare of uncontrollable infections. While the ancient world was certainly not a relaxing spa retreat, the specific pathogens that threatened early humans were completely different from the massive plagues that would later devastate advanced civilizations. The crucial factor lies in the way early hunter-gatherer societies were structured. These ancient people lived in small, highly mobile bands consisting of roughly 20 to 150 individuals. This single demographic detail had a massive impact on the spread of infectious diseases. Viruses require a constant supply of new physical hosts to survive and replicate. A pathogen must jump into a new body before its current victim either fully recovers or perishes. If your entire social universe consists of only 40 people wandering through a massive wilderness, a highly contagious virus faces an impossible logistical barrier. The infection simply burns through the available human hosts entirely too quickly. Once everyone in the small group either dies or develops natural immunity, the virus runs out of targets and completely collapses. This is exactly why apocalyptic crowd diseases like smallpox, measles, cholera, and the bubonic plague were not major threats during the Paleolithic era. Those catastrophic illnesses require dense, sedentary populations packed tightly together to sustain their transmission cycles. They need massive cities where residents share centralized water sources and live right next to their own waste and domesticated livestock. Hunter-gatherers unknowingly benefited from living in the exact wrong conditions for a mass epidemic to thrive. Instead of the bubonic plague, our ancestors battled a constant rotation of parasites, severe wound infections, and respiratory illnesses. They suffered through brutal gastrointestinal pathogens, tuberculosis, salmonella, and various mysterious fungal infections. Their daily reality was a relentless, low-level biological war against organisms they could not see and lacked the conceptual framework to even comprehend. Faced with these invisible threats, their primary line of defense was not a primitive form of medicine, but rather their own evolved behavior. This brings us to the absolutely brilliant biological concept known as behavioral immunity. The fundamental principle is that certain ingrained behaviors can physically prevent a dangerous pathogen from ever entering the human body. Humans evolved a complex series of automatic responses that function perfectly as a biological early warning system. You personally experience these ancient survival instincts every single day without even realizing it. That intense feeling of sudden revulsion you get when you smell rotting meat is a direct manifestation of behavioral immunity. The profound disgust you feel when looking at a festering wound, dangerous mold, or human waste is your brain running its ancient pathogen detection software. Scientific studies have demonstrated that even tiny infants show clear disgust reactions to potentially infectious materials long before anyone teaches them about germs. For early humans, this automatic biological alarm system was absolutely essential for staying alive. Their instincts naturally drove them to avoid contaminated drinking water, reject spoiled food, and stay away from visibly infected members of their group. Archaeological records provide fascinating evidence of these early disease prevention strategies. Neanderthals showed early signs of intentionally burying their dead. Regardless of whether their motivations were emotional or spiritual, the practical result of removing decomposing bodies from their living spaces dramatically reduced their exposure to lethal pathogens. Furthermore, the constant physical movement of ancient humans served as a brilliant, unintentional sanitation strategy. When any group of people remains in one specific location for too long, human waste inevitably begins to accumulate. This dangerous waste eventually contaminates the local food and water supplies, leading to severe gastrointestinal diseases. In an ancient world entirely lacking modern rehydration fluids, severe diarrhea could easily and quickly kill a healthy adult. By constantly packing up and moving their camps, mobile hunter-gatherers effectively reset their local sanitation levels on a regular basis. Then came the monumental discovery of controlled fire, a technology that forever altered the human relationship with disease. Cooking raw food over an open flame violently annihilates dangerous bacteria and lethal parasites. It transforms potentially deadly animal meat into a highly nutritious and chemically safe meal. The controlled use of fire dates back at least 400,000 years, and it completely revolutionized our evolutionary trajectory. Prominent researchers at Harvard University have even argued that cooking our food provided so many extra calories and eliminated so many diseases that it directly drove human evolution. We physically transformed into an entirely different species simply because our ancestors figured out how to apply intense heat to their daily meals. Of course, behavioral instincts and cooked food could only protect them so much. When lethal pathogens inevitably breached those outer defenses, early humans had to rely on the absolute marvel of the human immune system. Your immune system is arguably one of the most sophisticated defense networks operating in the known universe. It has the astonishing capacity to recognize approximately 1 billion completely distinct molecular shapes. It diligently maintains a permanent chemical memory of every single biological enemy it has ever encountered. It continuously deploys specialized cellular assassins to hunt down foreign invaders, all while you sit back and watch videos on the internet. For our ancestors, this miraculous internal system was constantly being stress-tested against a harsh, unforgiving environment from the exact moment they were born. This created an intense environment of evolutionary selection pressure. Individuals possessing immune systems that successfully neutralized local biological threats lived long enough to reproduce. Those unfortunate souls with weaker immune responses simply died and faded from the genetic record. Over thousands of generations, this brutal natural selection forged human populations with incredibly robust, highly specialized immune responses tailored to their specific local environments. We saw the dark side of this biological specialization when European colonizers first arrived in the Americas. They brought highly contagious diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza across the ocean. Because the indigenous populations had never encountered these specific alien viruses, they completely lacked any evolved genetic immunity to fight them off. The resulting death toll was catastrophic, wiping out between 50% and 90% of the population within 150 years. Their immune systems were not inherently weak. They were just perfectly optimized for an entirely different set of environmental threats. Beyond passive genetic immunity, ancient humans also took highly active, deliberate steps to treat their illnesses using the natural world. They actively utilized the staggering pharmacological diversity of wild plants to combat internal infections. For hundreds of millions of years, plants have been engaged in an invisible chemical war against fungi, insects, and hungry herbivores. To survive, these plants evolved an extraordinary arsenal of bioactive molecules capable of killing microbes, reducing severe inflammation, and managing extreme physical pain. Many of the most powerful pharmaceutical drugs we rely on today are actually derived directly from these ancient botanical defenses. Aspirin originates from the salicylic acid found hidden inside the bark of willow trees. Powerful painkillers like morphine and codeine are extracted directly from the opium poppy plant. The crucial malaria treatment known as quinine comes straight from the bark of the cinchona tree, through countless generations of careful observation and extremely dangerous trial and error. Early humans discovered exactly which local plants possessed magical healing properties. We have stunning archaeological evidence of this botanical medicine, dating back further than anyone ever imagined. At a famous Neanderthal burial site in Iraq known as Shanidar Cave, researchers discovered ancient pollen suggesting that medicinal flowers were intentionally placed alongside the deceased. Species like ephedra and yarrow, which possess scientifically proven healing properties, were found at the ancient scene. Even more concrete proof was discovered hiding inside the fossilized dental plaque of ancient hominids. Modern scientists extracted physical traces of medicinal plant compounds from the teeth of a Neanderthal found in Spain. This specific individual was suffering from an agonizing dental abscess and had been consuming yarrow and poplar, both of which contain natural painkillers. This incredible finding strongly suggests that a Neanderthal living 50,000 years ago was actively and accurately self-medicating their own toothache. By the time fully modern humans began recording their history, plant-based medicine had become a highly systematic and deeply respected science. The famous Eber's Papyrus from ancient Egypt, written around the year 1500 before the Common Era, catalogs over 800 complex medical formulas. Modern pharmacologists have tested these ancient Egyptian recipes and confirmed that many contain genuinely active compounds with powerful therapeutic effects. From traditional Chinese practices to deep indigenous healing arts, early humans utilized a process of observation and experimentation that was undeniably scientific in its fundamental structure. There is another crucial element of ancient survival that modern hospitals are only just now beginning to fully understand. Deep social connection is not just a comforting metaphor. It is quite literally a powerful biological medicine. Modern research shows that severe social isolation increases a person's risk of early mortality by the exact same terrifying magnitude as smoking 15 cigarettes every single day. Extreme loneliness dramatically elevates toxic stress hormones, severely impairs immune function, and increases dangerous internal inflammation. On the other hand, feeling deeply supported and cared for by a tight-knit community measurably accelerates physical healing and directly reduces the perception of pain, because ancient humans were strictly forced to live in tight, collaborative social groups just to survive the harsh wilderness. A sick individual was almost never left to suffer entirely alone. Someone was always nearby to provide warmth, fetch fresh drinking water, and offer vital nourishment. In an unforgiving world completely devoid of intravenous hydration drips, having a friend force you to drink water during a blinding fever was literally the difference between life and death. Ancient shamanic healing rituals leveraged this exact communal power to trigger profound physiological changes in the sick. When an entire community gathers together to perform a deeply meaningful ritual, the patient's brain is flooded with a powerful expectation of healing. We dismissively call this the placebo effect today, but this psychological phenomenon produces highly measurable reductions in stress hormones and real improvements in immune performance. A tribal shaman performing a sacred healing dance was actively unlocking the most powerful endogenous medicines the human body is capable of naturally producing. Our ancestors were incredibly resilient, but their health took a shockingly dark turn, roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. The monumental transition from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled agriculture is almost always celebrated as a massive leap forward for human progress. While farming eventually gave us towering cities, specialized labor, and written language, its immediate impact on the individual human body was absolutely catastrophic. Ancient skeletons from the dawn of agriculture reveal a horrific and undeniable decline in overall human health. The average height of early farmers plummeted drastically due to a severe lack of nutritional diversity. Painful dental cavities absolutely exploded across the population because their new diets were packed with sugary cultivated grains. More terrifyingly, the era of massive, uncontrollable infectious epidemics officially began. When humans finally stopped moving and began packing themselves tightly into permanent settlements alongside large herds of domesticated animals, they unwittingly created a biological nightmare. Those penned-up animals served as perfect biological bridges for mutated pathogens to cross over into the human bloodstream. Cattle ultimately cursed humanity with measles and smallpox. Domesticated pigs and captive birds introduced highly contagious, constantly mutating strains of influenza. To make matters worse, mountains of stored grain attracted massive swarms of disease-carrying rodents into human homes. Stagnant irrigation canals became a luxurious breeding paradise for millions of malaria-infected mosquitoes. The great historical plagues that eventually wiped out millions of people are almost entirely diseases of human civilization, not natural diseases of the wild. Our ancestors accidentally traded the incredible biological protection of their nomadic lifestyle for a massive caloric surplus. They paid for that agricultural progress by drowning in an endless ocean of new, devastating epidemic diseases. This remains one of the most profound and deeply ironic truths of human history. The very same societal developments that eventually gave us brilliant scientists, sterile hospitals, and modern vaccines also created the massive disease burden we are still fighting today. Early humans achieved all of this without ever knowing that microscopic germs even existed. They possessed zero microscopes, formulated zero vaccines, and relied on absolutely nothing that modern clinical science would officially approve of today. Yet, they managed to systematically compile a massive library of effective botanical medicines that modern pharmaceutical companies are still studying. The World Health Organization explicitly estimates that roughly 80% of our global population still relies heavily on these ancient, plant-based traditional medicines. Our ancestors naturally developed ingenious behavioral habits that drastically reduced disease transmission without ever understanding the complex biological mechanisms behind them. They built incredibly tight social structures that provided the exact type of emotional care modern science now recognizes as critical to physical survival. They cultivated fierce immune systems perfectly calibrated to their specific environments through thousands of years of brutal, unforgiving natural selection. We should never romanticize the staggering hardships of the ancient world. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous. Average lifespans were tragically short, and a simple infection could easily result in an agonizing death. We must remain incredibly grateful to live in an era where a deadly bacterial infection can be entirely cured by a cheap bottle of pills. However, there is something deeply humbling and profoundly inspiring about looking back at the raw survival of early humanity. They did not merely scrape by on blind luck. They survived through immense behavioral adaptation, incredible biological resilience, fierce social solidarity, and practical, hard-won wisdom. That brutal generational cycle of surviving, learning, and passing knowledge forward is the only reason we are all sitting here today. It produced the exact lineage of humans who eventually decoded the human genome, defeated smallpox, and built the astonishing medical infrastructure we completely take for granted. We are the direct result of countless generations of people doing their absolute best with only rocks, fire, and each other to rely on. And somehow, against all odds, their incredible efforts were just enough to keep the human story alive.